Hi everyone, it's Hannah from Hand Done Crochet and I am popping by today to do a quick tutorial about my new hat pattern. It comes in sizes from premature baby all the way up to large adult, so it can pretty much fit whoever you want, and there are details in the pattern and I'll pop all the information down below about how you can adjust it to be any length, any circumference, any yarn weight, any hook size. You can basically do what you like with this pattern following these simple steps that I'm going to show you now. To make my versions of the hat, I use Mary Maxim Mellow Spun DK, which comes in a load of beautiful colours. You get a 284 yards and about 260 metres in 100 grams, and each of the sizes, even the large size, only needs one ball of yarn. You're also going to need a 4.5mm or G+ crochet hook. Today we're going to be making the 0 to 3 month size, and I'm going to be using this lovely sand colour. So if you're making a different size or using a different yarn, you just need to pop to the pattern to find out how many foundation chains that you'll need to work. So for each of the hats, we're going to begin by popping a slip knot on the hook. And then if you pop to the pattern, you'll see how many foundation chains you need to make for the size that you're making. And for this smaller size, we're making 33. So chain out the amount that you need. And then for row 1, once we've made the foundation chain, we're going to be working back along, and I would recommend working into the back bumps. So turn and find that back bump of the stitch. And we're going to work in the second chain from the hook a half double crochet. So yarn over, pop through that back bump, yarn over again, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So you're now going to be working a half double crochet in each stitch up until the last 3 for the size that we're making, but it will be different depending on which size, so make sure you check in the pattern what you're up to. So a half double crochet in the back bump of the next 28 for me and this little size. And now here we are at the last 3 stitches, and what we're going to do is pop a slip stitch into each of those. Now remember, if you're making a different size, you'll have a different amount here at the end, so just make sure you check to see how many you need for your size. So pop your hook straight in, pull that loop through and through your existing loop. And this is what's going to give us our magic little bit of shaping at the top of the hat. So now we're ready to turn and work row 2. And at the beginning of each row, we're going to chain 1, and that's not going to count as a stitch. And so now we've got these slip stitches, these 3 slip stitches, and we're going to be working a slip stitch into the back loop of each of those. So let's have a look further along and see what we have on the top end of a stitch. So if you've never worked a front or back loop before, we have our front loop here facing us, that's the nearest loop to us, and our back loop here will always be the furthest loop from us. So this one's our front loop, and this one is our back loop. And for this pattern, we're just going to be working in back loops. So always the loop furthest away from us. So a slip stitch in the back loop only of the first 3. Just be nice and gentle with those slip stitches and it won't pull everything too tight. And so now we have got to our half double crochets, and we're going to be working a half double crochet into the back loop of each of these stitches all the way to the end now. So as you see, the shaping is only at the very top of the hat, just to cinch it in. So remember to turn it on its end. If you've not done any loop work before, turn it over onto its end and pop your stitch in that very back loop. Now here we are at the very last stitch, and now you can work into the back loop if you would like, but that can sometimes make it quite gappy there at the end, and we want this as a nice tight rib for the top of our hat. So I at this point work through the whole of the stitch for that last one, but it is entirely up to you how you'd like to do that last stitch. And then we're ready to turn and work row 3. And now this row is going to be what we call a short row in crochet. So we're only going to work a portion of the stitches. We're going to be working up until the last 3 for this size, but it will be different depending on which size you're making. So have a look in the pattern and see how many stitches it tells for you to work on this row 3. And they're all the same. We're going to chain 1, which doesn't count, and then we're going to slip stitch into the back loop of the next 29. So that will take us up to where our shaping is at the top. So here we go, stand it on its end, find that back loop, and these slip stitches, just keep them nice and loose and gentle. If you're finding that your slip stitches are coming out really tight, then what I would say is loosen your grip on your hook. And also see how you wind your yarn. I don't wind my yarn around and around my fingers. I have it just really gently through my hand. So if you do wind it tightly, then maybe just let go and just try and loosen your grip on everything, just for these slip stitches, and they will work much more freely. And there we are, we've got 3 stitches left, and we're going to leave those unworked, and we're going to turn to begin our next row. Okay, so our next row, row 4, is just going to be working the amount of stitches that you have from here onwards. We've left those because that's our short row we don't need to worry about. And we're going to chain 1, and we're going to do a slip stitch in the back loop only of each stitch to the end. So turn it on its end again, pop that hook in, don't fight it, keep it nice and relaxed, and slip stitch all the way to the end. And there we are at the end of row 4. So now we have done everything, almost everything that we need to know to make the hat. But what we're going to be doing now is another repeat of those 4 rows, but in a way that then we can carry on repeating and work as many as we like to make the circumference of the hat. So we turn our work, and you can start to see already this beautiful ribbed texture that we get. But the great thing about this hat is you can use it whichever way you prefer, because it's a slightly different rib pattern on each side. So once you've made it, you can decide, and you could even use it as a reversible hat. Okay, to begin row 5, we are going to chain 1, and then we're going to half double crochet in the back loop only of 29 for this size. But basically what we're going to be needing to do is half double crochet in the back loop only of each stitch up until the end of the previous row, because we worked that short row up until the shaping. So that's what we need to do here. Now we've got to the end here, we are going to be looking for the last 3 stitches that we're going to work the shaping into here. So they are from 3 rows below, and we're going to be popping a slip stitch into the back loop only of each of those stitches. So we pop right down here, ignore everything else that's come in between. We go 1, 2, and 3 slip stitches there. And then that's pulled that in, and we have exactly the same amount of stitches on that row that we had on the first row. So now we're ready to turn and work row 6. And row 6 is a nice easy one. We're going to chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch in the back loop of your shaping stitches, so 3 of those for me. And then we're going to half double crochet in the back loop only of the rest of the stitches of the row. And the more of these hats that you work, the more that you'll see that you get a really, really bizarre shaped piece of fabric before you join it. And you might think, what on earth are you up to, Hannah? But I promise it works. Once we are ready to seam it all together, it will all make perfect sense. And that's the end of row 6. So now we turn again, and row 7 is going to begin with a chain 1. And we're going to slip stitch in the back loop only of all the stitches that you need up until your shaping. So for me, that's 29. So a slip stitch in the back loop only of 29 for me. And that's 29. And then we turn leaving those last remaining stitches unworked for our shaping that we come back to. And row 8, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work back along in the back loops of these slip stitches we just made and work a slip stitch in the back loop only of each of them. Just remembering to keep your tension nice and loose, your grip on your hook and your grip on your yarn. Just be nice and gentle with it, and these slip stitches will just slide through. And there we have it. That is row 8 complete. And now you know everything that you need to know now, because all we're going to be doing is repeating rows 5 to rows 8 as many times as the pattern tells you, or as many times as you would like to for the circumference of your hat. Because as you see, when we then join it together, the stitches stand vertically. So you just keep making it for as many as you would like, as many repeats of 5 to 8 as you would like, in order to make your circumference of your hat. So go ahead and work those rows, and then meet me back here and we will seam it all together. So once you have worked the amount of rows that you need to for your size of that repeat of rows 5 to 7, we are ready to seam the hat together. The important thing to note here is that you are absolutely right if you have ended up here and you have stitches empty at the end here. Don't worry about that. We are going to seam that together. We've got a short row that we've ended up on here, so don't worry about it. I know it might feel strange, but it will work, I promise. So what we're basically going to do is, with our working end here, we are going to fold over and we are going to pop through to the first stitch of our row, because this is the direction that we want to join in. So we've now lined that up, and we should have exactly the same amount of stitches here in our foundation chain as we have here in this short row, plus the shaping section here. So all we're going to do is join with a slip stitch seam, but you can whip stitch if you prefer to. If you're going to whip stitch or sew it together, what I would say is leave a really long tail, because you're going to join around the top here as well. And then you can also use that tail to add a pom-pom or whatever you want to, if you want to put any embellishment on the top. So just make sure you leave yourself enough yarn. But I'm going to slip stitch them together. And I'm going to do it using the front loops here. You can do it however you like really, but the front loops here of this and the back loops here of this. So I go over that first stitch once more and pull through everything. And then through the front loop of that foundation chain there, and then the back loop of your last row. And just match stitch for stitch. Oh, I was too loose there. I was just about to say, make sure your slip stitches are nice and loose, just as we have been working them, but maybe not quite that loose, Hannah. So into that front loop there and the back loop there, and pull through everything. So again, the front loop of that there and the back loop of that last row. So just work your way along to where your shaping begins, and then we'll join those bits together. Okay, so here we are at the end of that short row, and we have got 3 stitches left here on this foundation row, and we've got those 3 stitches of the shaping. Now remember, they'll be different depending on the sizes that you're making, but just make sure they line up. And again, we're going to go in the front loop of there and the back loop of there. And just the last 2 here. And the last one's always a fiddly one to get into, and especially because I often think this when I'm filming tutorials, because I'm doing it all at arm's length so that there's room for everything so that you can see. But if I was doing this sat on my lap on the sofa in an evening, I would have this right under my nose, and that would be a lot easier than that appeared to be there. So there we are, that's all of our stitches joined along this seam here of our hat. And what we now need to do is break our yarn, but do give yourself plenty of tail there so that you can attach things. And we're also going to pinch in this top here now. Now you can sew in this end if you want to now, but I would just wait a minute. I would do your long tail first, and gather the top of the hat, and then do this one as the very last, but it doesn't really matter. You can do it however you would like to. So now what we're going to be doing is working around the top of this. Now, another thing that you can do is if you wanted to make it into like a messy bun hat, you could now pop an elastic band or hairband in this space here if you wanted to adapt the pattern for that. But if you don't and you want to close your top like I'm going to, we're going to run this piece of yarn all the way through the top of the ends of these rows, aren't we? Now this is going to be on the inside, so don't worry too much. And you'll see as you work around, it pulls it tight. And as I say, if you're going to attach a pom-pom, I would do this first, gather the top, and then attach your pom-pom after you've done that. I would say the bigger hats are much easier to do this to actually, because these are really fiddly when they're this small because you haven't got quite as much to put your hand in. Nearly there though. Get ourselves back round to that beginning, and you can over sew as many times as you like. If you want to go around a few times, then do, but once should be good, and then weave in your ends nice and neatly, but make sure the end doesn't pop through to the other side of the fabric, because I'll show you in a minute how nice and neat it looks if you make sure it's all on this side. So just over sew a good few times because you don't want that popping undone at all. And then go back in another direction. And then snip your end, but I'm going to leave mine there so I can add a pom-pom on later. And you turn to what is now our right side facing, and that is your hat complete. We're going to turn up our little edging there. Now the rib can be as high or as low as you like, and that, especially for the adult sizes, means that you can make your hat more slouchy or less slouchy depending on how you would like to wear it. So that is us complete. Now what an easy little perfect little gift. I've made that in just about an hour, that little size, so it's really nice and quick if you'd like to make a little gift for anyone. So there we have it. That is our little hat, and I really hope you've enjoyed making it with me. As I say, there are sizes right from premature baby all the way through to large adult, so do go and find the pattern, have a go, and then come and show me what you've made. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon.